Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It all started with a plain white envelope and an $800 fine for a party spot I didn't know existed on land I didn't know was mine. Turns out, my peaceful acres hid a secret. The local HOA had built a summer paradise on my property. They thought I'd never find out. They were wrong. It started with a letter. Just a plain white envelope with my name printed on it and no return address dropped in my mailbox like it was nothing. I opened it while sipping my coffee on the porch, expecting another flyer for lawn care or maybe a survey about local feed prices. Instead, I got hit with the bureaucratic equivalent of a sucker punch. Reminder, you are required to pay a fine of $800 by the end of the month for unauthorized construction of a canopy and illegal runoff into HOA Recreational Area 14B. At first, I thought it was a joke. I even chuckled. Then I read it again and again. HOA. I don't belong to a damn HOA. I live half a mile away from Winding Brook Villas, a polished little HOA governed complex that popped up 5 years ago at the edge of my property line. We've never interacted. I assumed we were both happier that way. I called the number listed at the bottom of the letter, mostly out of curiosity. A woman picked up. Sounded like she was about 20 and bored of everything. Winding Brook Community Office, she chirped. Yeah, hi. My name's John Ratliff. I just got this letter about some fine, but I don't think it's meant for me. Pause. What's the address? I gave it. Oh, yes. Lot 14B. That's part of your parcel, according to the GIS coordinates. You're listed as the owner. Wait. GIS what? She sighed. Property boundaries. Your lot includes 14B. That area is registered as adjacent but unclaimed for active use, which defaults responsibility to the owner. That's you. So, yes, you're within the HOA's extended responsibility zone. Extended responsibility zone sounded like something someone made up on the toilet after losing an argument. No, I'm not part of your HOA. That land's mine. I never signed anything with you people. I'm just reading what the database says, she replied with the tone of someone who'd accidentally swallowed a thumbtack. If you want to dispute the fine, you can send us a certified objection. But the due date still stands. She hung up before I could reply. I sat there for a long moment, staring across my fields. My land stretches out over 2,000 acres, some farmed, some leased. Some just trees and creeks and wild things left alone because I prefer it that way. The area they mentioned, 14B, was buried deep in a part I hadn't stepped foot in for years. Not since I lost my good hound to a copperhead out there, the kind of place only deer and mosquitoes go. And now someone's building canopies and draining runoff on it. I went inside and pulled up the county's property map system. Slow as hell, but it confirmed what I feared. Lot 14B was indeed within the bounds of my deeded land. It hadn't been subdivided, sold, or leased. No liens, no easements, nothing. Just sitting there, legally mine. I called a guy I know, owns a local drone survey company, told him I needed aerial footage of a back section of my property, specifically a rectangle running east of the Winding Brook fence line. He asked if I was finally trying to catch poachers. I told him I'd explain later. By that afternoon, I had a bad feeling coiled in my gut like a rattler in dry grass. Something was going on out there, and it wasn't just a misdelivered letter. 2 days later, the drone footage landed in my inbox with a cheerful, "Enjoy your scan" message. I opened it without much ceremony, expecting overgrown brush, maybe some dumped trash at worst. What I saw knocked the wind clean out of me. There was a canopy all right, bigger than I imagined, nestled right at the edge of the tree line where my land meets the fence of Winding Brook Villas, stood a damn near resort setup. A semi-permanent steel frame structure covered with canvas and solar lights. Underneath it, a line of grills, 2 picnic tables, and what looked like an industrial-sized cooler. A little further off, there was a splash pool, the inflatable kind, but big enough for 10 kids to scream in. Surrounding the whole thing were tiki torches, plastic Adirondack chairs, a string of garden lanterns, and get this, a handmade sign stuck into the dirt with wooden stakes. Winding Brook Community Area. Lot B. Community Area. My ass. I watched the footage in growing disbelief. Daytime showed families gathered around the grill, kids playing with water guns, someone dragging out what looked like a Bluetooth karaoke machine. At night, the place lit up like a campground, music playing, people dancing, beer bottles clinking. A few cars even parked just inside the tree line, almost hidden. They weren't just using my land. They'd claimed it like settlers planting flags. And I'd had no idea. I rewound the video and paused on the sign. The handwriting was all curls and civic pride, painted in cheerful HOA beige and blue. It wasn't just a rogue family sneaking in for a barbecue. This was organized, official-looking, intentional. I felt my jaw clench tighter than a rusted fence hinge. I started digging through old records, deeds, plats, tax rolls, anything that might show a lease or agreement for that area. Nothing. Not a single note, contract, or scribbled post-it indicating anyone had permission to do so much as sneeze on that patch of dirt. And yet here they were, treating it like a park. My park. There was only one explanation left. They assumed I'd never notice. And for a while they were right. Well, now I'd noticed. I called the drone guy back, asked him to send me the raw footage, GPS tags, and timestamps. He asked, "You catching poachers or neighbors?" I told him, whichever one's worse. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, watching the footage over and over, nursing a glass of cheap bourbon and replaying the same sentence in my head. They thought I wouldn't find out. I don't know what pissed me off more, the fact that they were squatting on my land, or the smugness it must have taken to do it openly for God knows how long without bothering to even knock on my damn door. The next morning, I shaved, put on my best worn-out flannel, and headed to the Winding Brook HOA office. If they wanted to play bureaucratic games, I was ready to roll the dice. But first, I'd let them believe I was just another friendly neighbor, a potential buyer maybe, someone curious about the amenities. Let's see how proud they were of Community Lot B when they didn't know the rightful owner was sitting across the desk. The Winding Brook HOA office was tucked into a beige prefab building across from a row of pastel-colored homes that all looked like they'd been printed from the same suburban template. Everything smelled like fresh mulch and detergent. I parked my old pickup across the street, figured the cracked fenders and dust coating might ruin the illusion, so I walked the last block. Inside, the lobby had fake plants and the kind of music you only hear in elevators or dental clinics. A young woman sat behind a desk with a laminated nameplate that read, "Ashley, Community Coordinator." She looked up and gave me a rehearsed smile so tight it could have sliced bread. "Welcome to Winding Brook Villas. How can I help you today?" I gave her my best sheepish grin. "Well, I've been thinking about moving into the area, looking to buy, maybe build. Thought I'd learn more about the community first." "Oh, that's wonderful," she chirped. "We have a few listings right now. Would you like an amenities packet and our community map?" I nodded, and she handed me a glossy brochure with more pastel tones than a baby shower. I flipped it open, pretending to admire the pool schedule and pet waste regulations until I got to the map. That's when I saw it. In the lower corner, shaded in HOA blue, sat a rectangle labeled Community Lot B. My land. Clearly outlined, named, and marked as a shared recreation area. There was even a smiling icon of a family next to it. "Is this open to all residents?" I asked, tapping the map. "Absolutely," Ashley said proudly. "It's one of our most popular spots, especially in the summer. The board maintains it, and families love hosting weekend events there." "Is it part of the HOA's property or leased?" She hesitated just a second too long. "I believe it was originally arranged with the previous owner, some kind of informal agreement. I think it was not your—" She caught herself. "The original landowner before Winding Brook was developed. I don't think there's a current lease, per se, but he never objected." My blood went cold. "So, it's not technically HOA property?" "It's in our amenities brochure," she said, as if that settled it. "We've maintained it for years." I nodded slowly and tucked the brochure under my arm. "Any chance I could see it in person?" I asked, as if I hadn't seen it already from 30 feet in the air. "Oh, you can just walk through the east gate. It's right at the end of Whispering Elm Trail." "Perfect. Thanks, Ashley." I walked out of there smiling like a polite idiot, brochure in hand, while my gut burned. They'd put my land in a pamphlet like it was a damn pool cabana. "Maintained for years," she said. "Never mind that they never paid a cent for it. Never mind that there wasn't a single piece of paper to justify it." I drove straight home and dug through every file cabinet, every lockbox, every musty folder I had. I pulled out my grandfather's deed. No easements, no leases, no exceptions. Just hard, cold ownership, pure and simple. They hadn't gotten permission. They just didn't care. They thought time and ignorance made it theirs. They printed it, shared it, built on it, and threw parties on it, my land, and now they'd handed me the evidence themselves. The envelope they sent in response to my attorney's formal request had that same smug professionalism, Winding Brook Villa's letterhead, glossy watermark, and the kind of stapling job that screams, "We have a printer and we know how to use it." But the second I unfolded the enclosed agreement, I knew it was pure fiction. The document was dated 12 years ago. Supposedly signed by my grandfather, Harold Ratliff, it claimed to grant Winding Brook Villas exclusive recreational usage rights to a 2-acre parcel, Lot 14B, for the duration of community need. No end date, no rent, no witnesses, no notary. Just 2 typed paragraphs and a signature that looked like someone had copied it off a birthday card. I didn't even need to pull out old documents to spot the inconsistencies. My grandfather signed everything in black fountain pen. This signature was in perfect uniform blue, like it had been stamped or traced, and it wasn't his full name either. Harold always signed with a flourish, H.E. Ratliff. This one just said Harold Ratliff, clean and suspiciously modern. My attorney Lauren looked at it and let out a low whistle. "This is ballsy." "That's one word," I muttered. We sent back a notice of intent to file civil action for trespass and fraud. That must have rattled them, because within a week, I got 3 new letters from the HOA, this time under separate envelopes. One fined me for neglected perimeter fencing. Another claimed my lot had restricted access to HOA members. The third accused me of failing to maintain visual harmony with community aesthetic standards. Whatever the hell that meant. They'd gone from squatting to spiteful. Then came the next move, the one that told me they weren't just afraid, they were angry. Flyers started popping up on telephone poles and mailboxes across the development. "Our park is under threat. Help us stop greedy land seizure." In smaller print, "One man wants to take your community space away. Don't let him." My name wasn't on it, but everyone knew. The real kicker was the digital stuff. A Facebook group appeared overnight, Save Lot B, posts filled with pictures of kids playing on my land, hashtags like "Let Them Play" and "Park Not Profit." A few residents even recorded videos in front of the canopy, pleading for me to do the right thing. The right thing, apparently, was letting them keep what they'd stolen. I'd seen bold neighbors before. Back in the day, someone once tried to graze goats on my west field and claimed the fence had just fallen down. But this was a new level. This was organized, calculated, and worse, public. They weren't worried about truth or law. They were fighting me with narrative. I kept calm, collected documentation, responded through Lauren, but privately, I was boiling. They had the gall to forge a signature, occupy my land for over a year, and now spin me as the villain for wanting it back. They weren't bluffing anymore. They were declaring war. And it was about time I stopped being polite. I don't believe in miracles, but sometimes the universe sends you a little nudge. Mine came in the form of a man named Curtis, retired landscaper, part-time handyman, and full-time gossip sponge. He used to do maintenance contracts all around Winding Brook Villas, including that little illegal summer camp they built on my land. Curtis called me after hearing rumors that I was suing the HOA for trying to give kids a place to play. His words, not mine. I invited him over. He showed up with a thermos of black coffee and a memory full of unpaid invoices. "They never told me whose land it was," he said, flipping through his old work orders. "Just said it was under community management. I figured it was city property or part of the HOA commons. Nobody said the word lease, and sure as hell no one said Ratliff. I offered him bourbon instead of coffee. He took both. He wasn't the only one." A few days later, an anonymous email popped into my lawyer's inbox. No name, but it came from a Proton mail account and included a zipped folder labeled Board Notes Confidential. Lauren flagged it as possibly fake. I flagged it as interesting. We opened it together, watching lines of HOA board meeting transcripts spill across the screen. One thread stood out, a message from the current HOA president, Gail Hensley, from about a year ago. "If we formalize anything, we risk losing it. Just use the land and keep up appearances. If he hasn't said anything by now, he won't." Another response, equally charming. "He's old school ag. Probably doesn't even check that part of his parcel. Out of sight, out of mind. Let the kids enjoy it while it lasts." And my personal favorite, worst case, we print up an agreement and say it was from the grandfather. Who's gonna check? Lauren leaned back in her chair like she'd just been slapped. "That," she said, "is textbook intent to defraud." That night, I took a walk down to the fence line. Lot 14B looked peaceful, almost serene under the dusk light, plastic chairs stacked neatly, tiki torches still standing proud like suburban sentinels. It was almost enough to fool someone into thinking it belonged, but I knew better now. The next morning, I called up the drone guy again, asked for high-res stills from the day of the first capture. I wanted timestamps, faces, license plates if possible. He delivered like a man who smelled a lawsuit brewing. One of the stills clearly showed two members of the HOA board dragging a picnic table onto the site. Another showed a third hammering the signpost into the dirt. We were assembling a mosaic of audacity, every piece more damning than the last. Then came the call from Lauren. "We've got a taker," she said. "One of the HOA board members is willing to talk. On background. Anonymous. For now." He wouldn't meet in public. Instead, we sat in the back of his pickup in a dim corner of the county park. He wore a ball cap low and kept looking over his shoulder like we were trading state secrets. "They all knew," he said. "Everyone on the board. There was never a lease. The agreement was cooked up after you asked for paperwork." "Why?" I asked. He shrugged. "They like the idea of having a private park. Said it made the listings look better, boosted the community vibe. It was just supposed to be temporary. I didn't even bother asking if they thought that justified it. I already knew the answer. People convince themselves of anything as long as it benefits them, especially when they think the real owner's too far away, too quiet, or too dead to care. Well, I wasn't dead, and I wasn't done. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and powdered coffee. It was the kind of place where every door creaked and every light flickered just enough to remind you that justice didn't come with mood lighting. Lauren looked sharp in a gray suit that said professional, but not corporate hitman, which was probably wise. I'd worn jeans and a pressed shirt, figured the farmer routine wouldn't hurt, especially when I was the one being dragged through the mud. Winding Brook showed up in full force. 3 board members, their lawyer, all starch and teeth, Gail Hensley herself, in a royal blue blazer that screamed HOA royalty. She gave me a nod that wasn't quite a smile and definitely not sincere. The hearing was supposed to be preliminary, just to set terms, maybe schedule mediation. Instead, it turned into a theater of absurdity. Their lawyer started by trying to argue that my years of neglect of Lot 14B constituted implied permission, said I'd allowed the land to be adopted by the community through habitual use. I almost laughed out loud. That's like someone stealing your truck and saying it's okay because you hadn't driven it lately. Lauren didn't flinch. She slid Exhibit A across the table, the drone footage. Exhibit B, the deed. Exhibit C, the forensic report on the forged signature, which confirmed in professional language that this ain't Grandpa Ratliff's handwriting. The judge, a wiry old man with a suspiciously patient expression, skimmed through the evidence, then looked over his glasses at the HOA's lawyer. "Do you have a notarized copy of this alleged agreement?" "No, Your Honor," the man said, smile cracking. "It was informal between the previous owner and the community board at the time. And does the previous owner have any surviving documentation confirming this informal lease?" "No, sir. He passed before it could be formalized." "Of course he did," the judge muttered and made a note that looked suspiciously like a sigh in pen form. Then came the witness statements. Lauren had called Curtis to the stand first. He shuffled up in his best Sunday flannel and calmly explained that he'd been paid cash, off the books, by HOA reps to mow and clean the back rec area. When asked who authorized it, he said, "Lady in the blue jacket." "The bossy one." Gail didn't flinch, just crossed her legs and looked toward the exit sign like it might teleport her away from this mess. But the real nail in the coffin came from the anonymous board member, the one who'd finally had enough. He testified under seal, but allowed his deposition to be read aloud. Lauren delivered it clean and steady. The board knew the land was not HOA property. The idea was to normalize usage until it became de facto ours. The document was drafted after Mr. Ratliff asked questions, not before. We debated faking a backdated lease, but settled on a signature-only version, assuming he wouldn't pursue it. The room went so quiet, I could hear Gail's foot tapping under the table. The judge called for a recess, but I knew we were past the warm-up now. The HOA's whole argument was crumbling, and the worst part, for them, wasn't the forged document. It was the arrogance behind it. The assumption that I'd never show up, never ask questions, never push back. They thought I was just a name on an old deed, someone who wouldn't fight for what was his. But I was there, and I wasn't going anywhere. I don't know who tipped off the press. Might have been one of the courtroom gawkers, or maybe that anonymous board member with a conscience. But the story broke faster than a cheap rake in wet clay. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing with calls from reporters, podcast producers, and one overly enthusiastic college journalism student who wanted to explore the intersection of agrarian identity and suburban overreach. I told him to call, back when he could define agrarian without checking Google. The headline on the local paper read like satire. Farmer fights HOA over backyard park he didn't know he owned. Beneath it was a photo of Lot 14B, grills, plastic chairs and all, under the caption, "The Land of Dispute." Within hours, the HOA launched a counteroffensive. They plastered flyers around Winding Brook and surrounding neighborhoods. "Our community park is under attack," complete with photos of smiling children and someone's golden retriever catching a frisbee, as if I'd threatened to bulldoze Disneyland. One version even had a quote attributed to me. "Private property means no community," which, of course, I'd never said, but try explaining nuance to a Facebook mob. Speaking of which, Save Lot B went into overdrive. New videos, now with somber piano music and dramatic slow-mo of toddlers waddling through bubbles on my land. They called me a reclusive millionaire hoarding green space and compared me to a landlord from a Dickens novel. I half expected someone to Photoshop me holding a pitchfork and laughing over a pile of evicted lemonade stands. My inbox filled with everything from heartfelt pleas to outright threats. One woman offered to pray for my soul, while another promised to rip up every inch of that land if it meant saving our community. Lauren advised me to install cameras along the fence line, which I did. And then I added a few trail cams in the brush, just in case anyone got creative. Then came the interviews. I wasn't planning to talk to the media, but when one of the HOA board members went on local morning television and said I inherited the land but not the spirit of community that comes with it, I figured it was time. I sat down with a local station, no lights, no makeup, and laid out the facts. The drone footage, the forged document, the internal emails, the receipts. Literally. The segment aired 2 days later. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. Just me, sitting on the tailgate of my truck, telling the truth with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a stack of paperwork in the other. The response was immediate and split straight down the middle. Half the town thought I was a hero. The other half thought I was a selfish relic. One guy sent me a gift basket with artisanal jerky and a note that said, "You're the only thing standing between us and HOA hell. Stay strong." Another neighbor flipped me off from his Prius at a stop sign. At night, the lot lit up like never before. Not with music and lanterns. Those were gone, but with cell phones. People were coming by just to take pictures. Some posed in front of the park. Others spray-painted signs on the HOA side of the fence. Prusajchan Free Lot B and Community Over Corporations. A few scrawled landlord on my mailbox in Sharpie. I left it. Felt like a badge at that point. The strangest part? The pressure wasn't just from strangers anymore. A couple of my own lessees, guys who rented grazing land from me, started asking if I really needed Lot 14B. "Maybe it's not worth the fight," one said. "You're already in the right. Why not let it go and look generous?" But generosity's got nothing to do with theft, especially when the thieves try to paint you as the villain. I didn't start this war, but they made damn sure I'd finish it. Round 2 didn't feel like court. It felt like theater. The room was full. Reporters, residents, even a few real estate agents pretending to be interested in zoning law. I caught one of them whispering into her phone, "Yeah, he's here. Looks grumpier in person." She wasn't wrong. This time, we weren't just arguing about a fine or a signature. We were going after the heart of it: fraud, misrepresentation, and unauthorized development. In other words, everything Winding Brook had tried to pretend didn't happen. Lauren started strong. She presented the aerial footage again, but this time overlaid with construction timestamps, tax maps, and property surveys. Side-by-side comparisons showed the land untouched 5 years ago, just trees and brush, compared to last summer's pop-up HOA paradise. We had drone shots, satellite photos, and even images pulled from a real estate listing that proudly described direct access to Lot B community green space. Bold, considering they never owned an inch of it. Then came the handwriting expert. Man looked like he'd been pulled from a crime novel. Gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of guy who got excited about ligature pressure and ink absorption. He went through slide after slide, showing how the supposed signature from my grandfather had clear signs of being forged. Too clean, too consistent. And the killer detail, it matched a copy of his name from an old public obituary, down to a specific typo in the middle initial. Gail Hensley, HOA president and certified smirk factory, was sitting there, stone-faced. Her lawyer kept objecting to everything short of the bailiff's breathing pattern, overruled every time. But the moment that cracked the whole thing open came during witness testimony. We called up a local contractor, guy named Dave Polinsky. He ran a landscape crew that had done improvements on Lot 14B, built the canopy, installed the posts, even poured a little concrete for the fire pit area. "Who hired you?" Lauren asked. "HOA board." Gail herself signed the check. "Did she mention ownership of the land?" "No, just said it was a community parcel." "I didn't question it." She was clear that time was tight, said we needed to finish before anyone noticed. Her words, not mine. There it was. Out loud. On record. No wriggle room. HOA's lawyer scrambled to pivot, claimed miscommunication, blamed a volunteer treasurer, and suggested that perhaps the board had been misled internally. It was the legal version of shouting someone else did it while standing next to a burning building holding a gas can. Then Lauren brought out the big one. Financial statements. Turns out, Winding Brook had dipped into their general maintenance fund to pay for the construction. Not only did they use my land, they used HOA dues from dozens of residents to build a park they didn't legally have the right to maintain. And once the board realized the mistake, they doubled down instead of coming clean. The judge didn't say much. He didn't have to. The silence in the room said it all. On the way out, one of the reporters caught me by the shoulder. "Mr. Ratliff, do you feel vindicated?" I looked at her mic, then at the faces behind her, some angry, some embarrassed, a few just confused. "No," I said, "not yet." Because we weren't done. Not until every inch of that land was mine again. Not just on paper, but in reality. Not until they tore down every post, every plastic chair, and every line nailed to the soil. The courthouse smelled the same that morning. Old air, legal paper, a hint of mildew no one could ever scrub out. But the energy was different. Tighter, sharper. The room was full again, but this time the whispers were quieter, more cautious. Even the HOA board had ditched their matching blue blazers for something grayer, more funereal, probably hoping to look less coordinated, less guilty. The judge took his seat without fanfare. No gavel, no grand opening. Just a pair of glasses slid down the bridge of his nose, and a stack of papers slapped onto the bench like a silent threat. He started slow, reviewing findings like a man assembling a weapon out of words. He noted that Lot 14B was beyond dispute privately owned by me. He cited the county land registry, the unbroken chain of deeds going back to my grandfather, and the absence of any easement, lease, or license ever granted to Winding Brook or its board. Then he got to the fun part. He called the so-called agreement a blatant forgery, and the HOA's justification for using the land a deliberate act of deception. His tone was dry as prairie dirt, but every word felt like a hammer. He said their actions amounted to unauthorized use, willful trespass, and, in producing a forged document, attempted fraud with intent to mislead. The room didn't gasp, but I heard a few chairs creak with the kind of tension you can't fake. Then he turned to the matter of damages. The defendant, he said, meaning the HOA, is hereby ordered to pay the plaintiff, Mr. John Ratliff, the sum of $420,000 in compensatory damages for unlawful use, emotional distress, legal fees, and degradation of private property value. Someone near the back let out a sharp breath. Gail Hensley looked like she'd just swallowed a broken light bulb, but the judge wasn't finished. In addition, he said, flipping a page with the finality of a guillotine, the defendant is ordered to remove all non-permitted structures from the plaintiff's land within 60 days. This includes, but is not limited to, canopies, fencing, recreational equipment, and signage. All costs to be borne by the HOA. And then, God bless him, he added, Furthermore, the board shall publish a formal public apology acknowledging its wrongdoing in the next 3 monthly newsletters and at the next full community meeting. I didn't. Smile. I just sat there, hands folded, like a man watching a long, dormant fence post finally drive itself back into the dirt. But there was one more twist. The county prosecutor, who'd been quietly observing the trial from the back row for the last few sessions, stepped forward after the verdict. He filed a motion to open a separate criminal case against Gail Hensley for document fraud and abuse of office. She didn't say a word, didn't protest, just sat there, eyes locked forward, like if she moved, she might unravel. Outside the courthouse, I didn't say much. A couple of reporters shoved mics in my face, but Lauren deflected them with a look that could sterilize glass. We didn't celebrate. We just stood by my truck, watching HOA members filter out one by one, heads down, murmuring, pretending not to recognize the man they'd tried to paint as a villain. But they knew, and they knew I knew. Justice doesn't come with a parade. It comes with silence, slow cleanup, and one hell of a bill. It took them 47 days to clear the site. I counted. One by one, the picnic tables vanished. The canopy frame came down in awkward sections, hauled away by a crew that avoided eye contact like I was radioactive. The plastic chairs, the string lights, even the fire pit stones, they all went into contractor dumpsters under a watchful eye. I had cameras on the tree line and a lawn chair nearby, just to make sure no one got creative with the definition of removal. On day 48, it was just land again. Wild grass reclaiming its space. No banners, no music, no kids with juice boxes, just dirt, roots, and silence. I stood at the edge of Lot 14B with a rusted post-hole digger in one hand and a brand new sign in the other. Took me a while to decide what it should say. In the end, I kept it simple. Sharp white letters on black painted wood. Not your land, not your pool, not your party. I planted it firm, right where their fake community sign had stood for over a year. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. The news ran one last segment. A journalist called it a strange victory for personal property rights in the age of overreach. I called it justice with splinters. The payout arrived a week later. After taxes, legal fees, and a donation to the local land trust, I had just enough left to do what I'd been planning all along. I met with a conservation group, signed paperwork to designate Lot 14B and a good chunk around it as a private wildlife restoration zone. Native plants, no construction, no access without permission. Just green space doing what it was meant to do. Exist without being turned into a beer-stained playground. A few weeks later, someone left a note taped to my gate. We could have shared it. You didn't have to go nuclear. I didn't reply. But I kept the note, tacked it to the wall of my workshop as a reminder. People rarely care about what's theirs. They care about what they can take without being told no. Funny thing is, some of the same folks who shouted the loudest started waving again. One guy even stopped by with a jar of honey as a neighborly gesture. I accepted it. I'm not vindictive, just territorial. The best part? The community meetings at Winding Brook got quieter. Word is, new board members were elected. They started publishing actual budgets, holding open forums. Someone told me they were thinking about building a real park on their land this time. Good. As for me, I got my fence posts reinforced, my property line freshly marked, and a new trail cam installed just in case. The coyotes are back. So are the deer. I even saw a bobcat once, slinking past where the canopy used to be. Turns out the land didn't need a playground. It just needed to be left the hell alone.